Good. How long have we got before we go live? We'll go back. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session, live stream with Shobi. My name is Abdul Chauhan. I'm the Vice President of Learning at Shobi. For those of you that don't know what Shobi is, it's an assessment and feedback platform, 3 million users around the world, many organizations using this in the UK as well. And I'm kind of very happy to have James Garnett with us today. James has a number of different roles, but I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself to the audience.
Thank you, Abdul. My name is James Garnett. I have a sort of primary role, which is Director of IT at United Learning, which is probably the largest multi-academy trust. We've got about 76 academies, 73 academies in the organisation, plus 13 independent schools. But at the moment, I am actually programme lead for the Department for Education's EdTech Demonstrator Programme. So I sort of coordinate the 40 plus EdTech demonstrators and the support they're offering to schools and colleges throughout England. And of course, I have to be very clear that this is DFE funded or state schools and colleges, and unfortunately independent schools. And those schools in Wales and Scotland aren't able to join the programme. So that's sort of caveat and all of
that. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's kind of start off a little bit about yourself, James. Tell us a little bit about your background, like, education, kind of where did you teach and your subjects, anything interesting about yourself and the journey to where you are now?
So I got a degree in engineering and started my career as an engineer, and then for various reasons found myself working in a riding stables, riding school actually, training to be a groom and learning to be an instructor. And at the end of or after, on an employment training scheme in the early 90s. And then I decided to become a teacher. I enjoyed my first 3 years at university and thought I'd give it another go. And I found, to my horror, that I actually enjoyed teaching. And teaching maths. So I started as a maths teacher and then very quickly found myself going into IT and running IT systems. And so for a while, I was running a network as well as teaching IT and a bit of maths. And then through various career paths, found myself as Director of IT at Surbiton High School, which is one of the independent schools in what is now United Learning. And while there, I got involved in some building projects and got asked to work on the Academies programme that United Learning was getting involved with, and worked on some of the big capital projects on academies such as Walthamstow Academy. I did a bit of work on what has become Paddington Academy. And then I moved north to work on the sort of Sheffield, Barnsley, and some of our northwestern academies in the group. As a project lead, and then I've now found myself as Director of IT after being here long enough. That's probably how I put it.
But that's kind of quite a spread. I think, I think United Learning, if I remember rightly, were kind of, obviously they are very, very large, Matt, and it was before the whole system of RSCs having mats that are kind of quite within quite close proximity of one another. So I'm assuming like a lot of the schools that are within your mat are kind of quite spread out.
Yeah, so we start from Carlisle, where we've got the two academies up in Carlisle, and we work our way down the country, all the way down to Bournemouth, where we've got academies. So the concentration in the northwest, so around Manchester, we've got quite a few secondaries and primaries there, some in South Yorkshire. And then some in the sort of Kettering, Northamptonshire area, some in London, and then along the south coast we have some as well. And then dotted around there as well, we've also got some independent schools in the group. But yeah, so we are a sort of national group, but more of a rectangle. We don't go to the south. We don't tend to go into the southwest, and we don't go into East Anglia.
Okay, yeah, I got you. So let's kind of talk a little bit more about the EdTech Demonstrator Programme. I know last year when last year was the first year of it, we had Ty Goddard on as well on the live stream, and that was kind of when it was first launched. I think there was a lot of excitement around it as well. And, I've had the privilege of kind of visiting some of the EdTech demonstrator schools as well, and the work that they're doing. So quite a few of them are kind of using Shobi as well. So that was kind of my interest originally as well. So for those that don't know, what is the EdTech Demonstrator Programme? What's the purpose of the EdTech Demonstrator Programme?
So I think originally, and it was set up pre-COVID, it was designed to help schools and colleges get the most from technology and really get them thinking about long-term strategy. So what is it that we can, how is it that we can make the most of the technology that we've got? How can we put in place a strategy that ensures that we invest sensibly, buy the right tools, and have a long-term strategy that enables us to use it effectively. COVID came along, and the team who are running it last year sort of pivoted very quickly into just providing immediate support. How do we deliver remote education? And we as United Learning got involved as a demonstrator back in October, November time, and predominantly it was about immediate support. How do I do X? How do I do Y? I've had my Office 365 account set up, but it doesn't do what I want to do. What should it do? And so going and giving the support that help people to do and that immediate sort of remote learning or learning in school with some children at home, and how to manage that effectively. I think the hope in phase 2, which is what we're in at the moment, was that the program would sort of pivot as we came out of COVID, and we all thought we were, into going back to that long-term support. And I think we've found out very quickly that I think people have been struggling partly to recover from COVID, but also some of the ups and downs. So there's still been a bit of that sort of emergency support, but we have tried very hard to do long-term digital strategy thinking with schools, colleges, and trusts. And it's about getting them to think about, well, where do I want to be in 3 years' time? How is it that we start putting in place things we need? And to support leadership to begin that process. Now, you can't do it in 12 months, but we can help people move in that direction. And so the sort of support that's been going in has been around various levels. So the most basic level has been, can you just help me with this tool or this platform? So we will see people maybe saying, well, we got Shobi, how do we make better use of it? I know that you do a lot of work on that, Abdul, as well. Yeah. Or it could be using Seesaw or some of the other platforms that are out there. You've got it, but how do you use it more effectively? And I think that's probably a good starting point for anyone, is what is it you've got? And are you using it as effectively, or is it still sitting in the cupboard because you've forgotten that it's there or how to use it? And so you'll see people talk, say, we've got visualized, how can we use them more effectively for modeling? And it's very sort of targeted and focused. And that's the sort of starting point with the demonstrator program. And then it might be, well, that's really good. And you mentioned something about strategy. Can we talk a bit more about strategy? And then it moves into maybe a strategic thinking. Some will come in and say, no, we know we've got to do something. How do we put in place a digital strategy? And that will then be starting that conversation about, well, this is the sort of framework you need to work with. And on the EdTech Demonstrator website, there are some documents around how you can do digital strategies, some sort of guidance there, as well as signing up and getting to talk to a demonstrator about what you need to do.
Sorry, James. I was just on that EdTech demonstrator. Just tell us what the website is for those people that might be listening.
Oh God, gotta remember what it is myself.
Let me see if I can.
It's EdTech Demo at UCST, if I remember rightly. Let me just check for you. Yes, edtechdemo.ucst.uk is the website.
Yeah,
and if you put it into any popular search engine, it will come up very quickly.
I'm just gonna stick it in the comment section here as well for anybody that's kind of joining us as part of that. But yeah, okay, that's good to know. So the idea is that we have a whole bunch of kind of EdTech demonstrator schools, and people can sign up through the edtechdemo.ucst.uk website. And they're then able to go and visit those schools, ask questions. I went to one of these. It was at Harlow College, and it was fantastic. It was a really good insight on the day. And I just went as a visitor. They are a Shobi Socrative kind of FE college, but I just went as a visitor. I wasn't kind of doing any presentations or speaking to anyone, but just to kind of get that experience. And it's quite powerful speaking to the student and seeing how it translates right down into the classroom. It was also quite interesting listening to the leadership team speak about their vision and what they've done and how they've done it, and then walking around and being able to kind of see it in action, which is kind of quite powerful. Is that typically the format, James, of a lot of these kind of visits?
It can be. So visits have been very rare because you just can't, getting into schools has been very hard.
Of course.
So a lot of it is done remotely. And the beauty of that is that when you've got 40 plus schools and colleges that are demonstrators, we can pair you up with someone who has got the right sort of knowledge to work with you. And they may well be in another part of the country. A visit is not essential and isn't needed because you can do most of it, if not all of it, through things such as video conferencing and conversations, and lots of online training is done that way as well now. And I think what the pandemic has showed us is that online training works very well, particularly when you don't have to travel, and you're able to target or work with a wider group of people. But if you do want to visit, there are demonstrators do hold open days and will invite people in to visit. And it may well be that someone from the demonstrator will come and visit you and talk to you. And I know that another one of the colleges, West Suffolk College, Nick there will go and visit a school for a day, and he will not only work with leadership, he will also go into the classroom and do some team teaching with some of the staff to help them see how you can do it in the classroom. And there are other demonstrators who will do similar things. So there's a range of ways of working, and it's not just about going to visit, it's also about those conversations. And it's interesting, we've mentioned there both colleges, and the program is designed with colleges in mind as well as schools. And there are colleges who support schools because they have the skills and expertise. And I know Harlow are very good with their iPads and some of the work they do around embedding technology into everything they do. And I think it's when people get assigned a college, it's not to go, oh, they're not a school. Actually, they bring a lot to it because of the work they do and how far ahead they are in looking at. I mean, they call it quality, the quality of teaching and the way they work. So whether it's a primary school working with a secondary, or whether it's a secondary working with a college, it doesn't make any difference because they have the skill set people need.
And I suppose it's kind of interesting this, because I think that the ability to kind of cross-fertilize across stages and different schools is actually a really powerful thing and a useful thing to do. A secondary school going to a primary to kind of see their strategy and their approach, or going to a further education college and so on, is actually quite a powerful thing. Sometimes I think we kind of think in silos, so we just want to go and see another secondary school that's very, very similar to ours, but actually going outside that circle makes for some really innovative thinking and discussions. I think that's kind of quite powerful. Is that something that you're seeing as part of the program?
To some extent, I think it's because you can't visit. Sometimes you feel you're not seeing the difference. I'd never worked with colleges before I took on my program lead role on the program, and I went to Grimsby recently, and just their focus, which was very much about, well, what is the long-term career path for the students? How are we preparing them for the world of work? Which is very different to almost what you see in secondary education, where you have a curriculum that says you've got to do this, out you pop with an exam, and off you go. And to look at their focus and how they are working differently, I think is really powerful for leadership to think, actually, we need to think slightly differently sometimes. Yes, we do have to prepare them for exams, but actually, what else can we do to support them into the world of work? Likewise, for a secondary going into a primary, to see how they are using technology to drive things such as literacy, numeracy, how they work with, mixed ability classes, which in fact is what primary classes are predominantly, and how they're using technology to engage those children differently, I think is really useful. And the comments that some of the primaries make is they leave us and go to secondary school and they sort of stagnate because secondaries don't realise what happens in primary. So it's quite useful to have that cross fertilisation, and for primary to see what secondary is doing. Actually, we like that. We'll have a bit of that. So I think it is very useful to have that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think, and there is no reason why you can't work across boundaries. And I think there's a lot to be gained from it.
I just the other day, actually earlier this week, I made a trip down to London and I visited the Leo Academy Trust. It's a one-to-one Chromebook school using the Google infrastructure and so on. I think it's kind of it was really refreshing to kind of hear the vision from the top. Phil Hedger, who's the CEO there, and it was what I found really kind of quite powerful when I was kind of driving back, reflecting on the discussion. We had some fantastic discussions around assessment feedback and all that kind of stuff. But what was really kind of fascinating was that, a lot of these schools that are the EdTech Demonstrator type, that are quite visionary, that kind of, are leading the way in this, they're always looking and always questioning their vision and what they can do better and how can they get better. So what I like about it was that the conversation was not about just standing still and what we've done, but they're always looking to how to improve and how can we be better and how can we do better for the kids and so on. And that for me is kind of quite a powerful approach that I've kind of seen. Dalton St. Mary's, another one, Hannah Croskery there, having that conversation with her, always looking for that opportunity to kind of see other things as well. And of course, Harlow is one that Kelly over there, I've kind of spoken to her a number of times. The last conversation I think we were having was about how they were looking at augmented reality and building a car engine in augmented reality that would then allow the students to interact, and always kind of pushing that boundary. And I think it's a great culture that is kind of created, and it's something that's been needed for a long, long time in terms of recognizing and kind of allowing other schools to go in and actually visit where possible, or even just to have that simple conversation around strategy and where that might go. So kind of really great work, really good stuff.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about Leo, and I know they've been working with a couple of trusts on moving on one-to-one programs and helping those, trusts that come and say, we've seen what you're doing, we really want to do something similar. How can you help us get there? And actually, the demonstrators can help you get there. In half the times they've taken out all the gaps, all the areas where they've made mistakes. They can sort of smooth those bits over, and you can get there more quickly. And I think that's a really powerful way of learning. But the demonstrators themselves learn from supporting schools. Whenever you go into any education establishment, you look at what they're doing. Oh, I like that. That's really interesting. I haven't thought of that. And they will then take that knowledge and embed it back into their digital strategies and their school improvement plans and their long-term sort of thinking around, and it's just not about education, it's about not just about tech, it's about education. It's everything they're doing. And your comment about augmented reality is fascinating, because as a secondary school teacher and someone who works predominantly in primary and secondary schools, augmented reality and VR I've sort of put to the side. Seen it at the Bet Show quite a few times. Oh God, don't need that. I've seen the 3D glasses. What was that, 5 years ago? And you go, no, not interested. But you look at the colleges and how they're using augmented reality, using VR headsets, looking at esports, and you're going, actually, secondary schools need to be looking at what's happening, and primary schools can learn from this as well, because some of the stuff they're doing is amazing. Basingstoke College were using it to do. So they can't go out and work in a traffic management center, but they can put on VR headsets and they can protect, and they can work in that sort of environment. They can work on virtual interviews, and it looks at what you're doing. And so it's really changing a lot of their thinking and the way they operate, and better preparing young people for the world of work. I think it's fascinating.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, and I completely agree with you. I think one of the things that's been kind of quite interesting for me is back in kind of like, when was it, 2013, 2012, round about that time. I was back at ESA Academy at the time, and it was a new build, and we'd done the first kind of large scale one-to-one and all this kind of stuff and so on. So we were getting visitors, and it was pretty much like this EdTech demonstrator kind of approach, right? People would come, senior leaders would come, they'd be asking questions around, hey, do we really need interactive whiteboards? Yeah, do we really need to do it this way? Do we need to do this? And what is the power of one-to-one, and how do you make it affordable? And all these kind of questions. And there were some fascinating things that were going on along the way. However, and then 2014 onwards, I left there and I started working in different countries with different organizations. The concept of study trips amongst educators was really prevalent in Sweden and in actually quite a lot of the Nordic countries. So it was quite an accepted thing that teachers would actually go and visit other organizations, whether that was in their own countries or occasionally, even if it was abroad. And it was seen as really good professional development. And I happened to be involved in quite a few of those. And what was really quite fascinating was that the concept of this study trip, where they went to a school or two different schools, they had a tour. They was kind of well planned. They'd meet the students, speak to them, speak to some of the teachers, listen to the leadership team, and then the following day they would actually sit and kind of really discuss in detail what they had seen and how it would work for them, and what is it that they would be, what learning and what could they take back and all that kind of stuff and so on. And I think like one of the things that the EdTech Demonstrator Program is kind of beginning to do is to bring that concept of, a study trip, the ability to kind of physically go to a place. And I know COVID and all of that kind of stuff has kind of slowed that down. But I think that there is something hugely powerful that kind of that cannot be replicated online, where you go and actually feel the environment within an organization that's doing this really quite effectively. And I think and I hope that, it's one of the kind of cultural directions that, the DFE take with kind of learning about the effective use of technology, leadership, and so on. And I kind of see EdTech Demonstrator Program almost like the beginning of that.
Yeah, I think what I find interesting about the study trips is, I mean, there were showcase schools and there were reference schools and there are Apple distinguished schools, and they've existed. But my concern is that with some of those in the study trips, they're dip in and go. And what the demonstrator program gives you is not just the dip in and go. It's dip in, come and see us, and then we've got a conversation that may go on for 12 months. And it's that ongoing relationship where, as a school that's going on this journey, you can pick up the phone and say, listen, I know we spoke 3 weeks ago and we've done this much. What do you think? Yeah, and what about doing this next? And you can have a conversation with someone who doesn't have any financial input into the conversations you're having, and therefore you've got this peer support, and you feel you can go back to them and have a chat with them and say, yes, okay, where next? Okay, that's brilliant. And then they come back 3 weeks later. Now, what are we going to do next? And can you have a look at this plan, because we're not quite sure about it? Can you have a look at this? We're modeling what it might cost over the next 5 years. What are we missing? Here's our plan. What's missing on this plan? And you might say, you're missing out on some infrastructure stuff there. Have you thought about cloud strategy? And they can go, oh, no, I hadn't thought about that. Or what is cloud? And so that's really, really good. I think the concern for me is that those people who never think about the study trip don't think technology can have an impact on educational outcomes. And I'm a firm believer that technology can have a really big input or an impact on educational outcomes. We look at the digital divide that was talked about in when COVID started, and there were children at home without any devices, and the DFE put a lot of money into equipping children with various devices. I think the concern I have now is that either those devices just find their way back into a cupboard and never go anywhere, or they're not making effective use of those devices because they're not using the tools that are there for them. And for me, that's critical. Whether it's using tools like Showbie to extend the learning outside of the school walls or outside the school day, so that children can learn better. Whether it's using looking at how teachers teach and how they can make better use of technology to improve learning outcomes, whether it's through low stakes quizzing, whether it's using visualizers for modeling or your iPad to model with, whether it's one-to-one in the classroom, all the way up to sort of leadership, looking at, well, if we implement this, we can be more efficient. People can have more flexible working. We've got more data. How do we interpret it? And all those sorts of things need to come together. And the schools that do it well will improve the outcomes for their children versus those that buried their head in the sand. And I think it's important that people understand that. And I think the program can help people start on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really kind of powerful thing. I completely agree with you. Yes, study trips were great, and you did get people bobbing in and out, but this is a more relationship kind of approach where conversations will continue afterwards as well. And I think there's a real need for that. I'm a big advocate of one-to-one technology. I kind of feel like the more time goes on, like it should be like part of the tables and chairs in a classroom kind of thing, maybe even. And I know a lot of schools, it's a big financial initial outlay, and schools kind of need to think about that alongside other things, but I do feel that there's a lot of operational efficiencies that can be gained out of the effective use of technology, especially in a one-to-one environment. And I think I think I've said this before, but getting the DFE or our kind of education system at a point where schools don't really have to worry about access to technology, it would be a great place to be. And I can kind of see that the EdTech Demonstrator Programme alongside something like that would be hugely effective, in terms of what's what. And there are a lot of schools that have kind of been demonstrating, showing, sharing, and so on, whether they do that through social media, whether they do that through open days or whatever it is, and so on. But I think to formally have a program that's funded by the DFE is hugely powerful. And I don't know this, I'm going to throw this out there, James, but how many schools that are not demonstrator schools have kind of taken part or made use of this kind of the program so far? Is there data or numbers off the top of your head?
Oh, lots and lots of data. So we've had about 1,700-1,800 schools and trusts, and we have to be careful when we look at the numbers, because sometimes you'll get a trust will sign up and we'll work at trust level. Sometimes a trust will sign up and will then break their schools out and will work at the trust and individual school level, and colleges. So you've got a large college, we may do a lot more work with them than we would with a small primary, just simply because of size and working with individual departments within a college. But I would hope that 2,000 we would have worked with. I mean, we had ambitions for many more, but coming out of the summer term and into autumn, schools that had wanted to engage were going, actually, we haven't got capacity. We've got staff going ill, and even in January, with schools struggling to get staff on premises to teach, it made it much harder for people to engage with the program. And so that's been an ongoing challenge throughout this whole year, is just people's ability to have the time. Having said that, when they have got capacity, they do engage. And I think we've seen some really good progress for some of these colleges and schools and trusts who have gone leaps and bounds forward. They've sort of gone, they're saying that we've made 3 years progress in 9 months in terms of where our digital strategy is. I think that's a really important one. One-to-one, I agree wholeheartedly with you. And there are some demonstrators who work in some of the most deprived parts of the country who are one-to-one, and they say, yeah, it's possible. It's just a question of how you budget and how you manage funding. And I think the DFE program has been really powerful in uplifting, people are suddenly gone, actually, I can now almost get there because we've got all these devices. There's then some long-term planning you need to think about. How do I ensure that I replace them on a regular basis?
Definitely.
But that's doable.
You know what? I've just looked at the time and what happened, and it's actually 29 minutes gone. We have a minute left, and this is typically what happens when we get when we kind of chat all things education and technology. But James, what's the future of the EdTech Demonstrator? Like, what? And obviously, it might be pie in the sky stuff or stuff that you don't know, but there's obviously a demand for this. There's obviously schools that are signing up to it. So, do we know? Like, we're in phase 2 at the moment. What might that look like? Where can people go? Maybe to kind of find out, or do we have a deadline time or anything like that?
I'm hoping at the end of so by the beginning of March, we'll know what's happening in the summer term. That sounds very short-termism, but by the end of this month, we should know what's happening for the summer term, and then maybe around the BET show, we'll find out more about what's happening beyond that. I certainly know that as the program lead, I'm contracted to run the program for phase 2, and then if there's a phase 3. That will be, they'll need to go out for a new delivery partner. Might be me, might not, and they would also need to look at new demonstrators, and that might be existing as well as new ones. But I think it's just keep an eye on the DFE website, keep an eye on the EdTech. When we find out what's happening, we'll be putting it on our website and on our Twitter feed, which is at EdTech Demo, which has continued from last year. So whoever is running the program, you pass the Twitter feed onto them. And continue. So look at the Twitter feed. When we know, we'll tell people.
Excellent. James, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. I'm sure we could have gone on for a lot longer. Thank you for kind of taking time out of a busy schedule to kind of be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. And I look forward to catching up with you at the BET show at some point.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks.